Hi, I'm Mark, and on this episode of On the Go with Mark, I'm going to talk about the 3 different backpacking stoves I have, why I like each one, and how I decide which one I'm going to take on a backpacking trip. There's lots to come, so stick around. Hi, welcome back, and thanks for joining me. I'm Mark, and on this episode of On the Go with Mark, we're just talking about the 3 different types of backpacking stoves I have and how I decide which one that I'm going to take with me on a backpacking trip. Let's start with the simplest one first. That's my cat food can stove. The thing that I like about the cat food can stove is that it's very lightweight. It weighs less than half an ounce, and it's very simple, has no moving parts. Another nice feature about this is it was really inexpensive. It was about 50 cents for the cost of the can of cat food. And then I had a couple more dollars in getting a hole punch that was sturdy enough to be able to punch through this metal of the can. Another nice thing about it is it uses fuel that's really easy to find. Denatured alcohol will do the trick, or I use heat. It's just easy to find in any automotive parts store. You can also find it in Walmart or any other general merchandise store that carries auto parts. And the other thing about this stove is it's really simple in terms of what you're going to use it for. Since it produces an uncontrolled flame, you don't have a dial to make it hotter or colder. You don't have anything to control the flame. So it's really for boiling water. So a couple of drawbacks about this is that the flame has no color. You can't see it. So if you were to light it, there's no flame to stay away from. You can't hear it. It's silent. So you just have to be careful and be aware that you've lit this and that you're getting ready to cook with it. The other thing is it's not very good for cold weather. It doesn't produce enough vapor in order to light, and it doesn't burn as efficiently in cold weather. I take this one when I'm going on a short trip and I'm not going to cook. I'm simply going to boil water. The reason that I don't like to take it on trips that are much longer than that is because the fuel actually ends up being the heavy part of this. So 1 ounce of heat weighs 1 ounce, and it takes about an ounce to get water boiling on, I'm going to say, an average day. So you can see that if you're going to boil water more than a few times, then the weight of the fuel actually becomes the drawback to taking this stove. So the nice part about this is in its simplicity and how lightweight it is and how easy it is to use on a backpacking trip. So next I'm going to talk about the canister stove that I have. The canister stove is really simple. It's easy to use, and it gives you some control over the flame that you don't have with the alcohol stove. So with some of these, and you'll see here, this just screws onto the top of a canister. I'm going to go over a couple of features of this one. What I use is the Snow Peak Gigapower stove, and I chose this one because I have titanium cook pots, and titanium can burn a little bit easier than aluminum or stainless steel. So I chose one that I thought the flame would be spread out a little bit wider so it wouldn't be so concentrated and put all that heat onto such a concentrated point on the titanium. As you can see, it has a valve on the side, a control for controlling the flame. So you could bring this down to a simmer. You can turn it up so that you can bring things to a quick boil. And then it folds down pretty nicely. So in this case, my arms here, they fold up, and then the valve is on a pivot point right there, and I can put it into this nice little plastic container that I've got. And then this, along with the canister, depending upon which pot I take, usually will fit nicely inside of the pot. Some other features of this are that the canisters themselves are pretty easy to find. You can see here I've got a couple of different sizes and I've got a couple of different manufacturers. This one is from Jetboil and it's got 100 grams of fuel in there, and it's an isobutane propane mixture. This one is actually by Snow Peak, and it's under the same brand as my Gigapower stove. It's a Gigapower fuel. And this one has 110 grams of fuel, so just a little bit more, but yet in a very similarly sized canister. They come in these larger canisters as well. This one has 220 grams of fuel, but the advantage is if you're going to go on a longer trip, you can take a larger one, and it's a little bit less weight than two of them combined because the canister just doesn't weigh as much as what two of these would. So you can see here I've written on this that it's 737 grams full and it's 220 grams of fuel. So there's a little bit over 150 grams just in the canister weight on that. I do keep track of my usage and how many times what I've boiled or how long I've used it, so that way I can judge on my next trip, if I'm only going away for a couple days, do I have enough left in a small canister, do I need to pack another one? Good things about this are there's little to no maintenance. You just need to keep the area where the flame is produced clean, as well as the air inlets right down here. I said earlier you can control the flame on this, and on this one it sounds kind of funny to say it, but you can turn this one off when you're done with it, and unlike in the cat food can stove, it's on until your fuel burns out. You just have to let it run out because there's no way to turn the flame off. So this has a similar drawback as what the cat food can stove has, and that is that it doesn't work well in cold weather. And I've seen some people take these on, I'm going to say semi-cold weather, where it's maybe dipping down to about freezing, but it's not really getting down very far below freezing. And then what they'll do is they'll just put the canister, tuck it inside their coat to give it some heat. And I suspect that there's a couple of things. One, the canister itself needs to be warm so that it has pressure in order to cause the fuel to come out when you attach the stove and open the valve. The second thing is it still has to have a good vapor point so that the vapors can ignite and stay lit. So if you put this canister inside your coat before you're going to use it, you might be able to warm it up enough that you're able to use it, and it just might not burn as efficiently. So you might need to figure on taking a little bit more fuel with you so that you have enough fuel to make sure that you're going to be able to cook your meals and boil your water. Now I'm going to talk about the third stove that I have, and it's the MSR Whisper Light stove, and it's a liquid fuel stove. I got this one simply for taking out in the winter, and I'll explain why over the next couple of minutes. One of the things about this stove, similar to the canister stove, it's got a valve, and it's actually over here. This type of stove has a couple of parts. It's got a liquid fuel container right here. It's got a fuel pump here, and what this pump does, there's a valve to control the flame, and there's a pump here to pressurize the fuel tank so that it'll come through this hose right here. It comes up this coil where it's vaporized by its own flame, and then the air mixture is down here and the flame comes out the top, and it's a pretty wide flame here. This loop right here is the key to being able to use this stove in the winter. The liquid fuel, as it comes up here, it's heated up by its own flame, and that causes it to vaporize, which lets it burn in the cold weather. Now on to the drawbacks, why I only use this in the winter. First, it's heavier. The valve itself, which screws on right here and which has this pump, this hose, and this stove set right here, it's nearly 16 ounces. Now that includes the maintenance kit that I carry with me in case there's a problem. It also includes the stuff sack and a windscreen, because you're going to need all those parts if you're going out in the winter. You have to do a little bit extra to make sure that this one's efficient. The other drawback is there's a lot more parts to this one. There's some O-rings in here to seal the pump to the fuel bottle. When you put that on, there's some O-rings inside of there. So every once in a while you have to get a maintenance kit and you have to replace those O-rings. Another thing is it might actually take some practice lighting it. So the key here is you're starting off with liquid fuel. So as you turn this on, there's this little cup at the bottom with a wick, and you have to get a little bit of fuel down in there, which is what you actually light. That produces a flame, which while that's burning, in turn starts to vaporize the liquid fuel that's in this loop of this hose and piping right there. Once the flame starts to burn down, around the burner itself, you'll start to see some blue flame that's coming from the vaporized fuel. And at that point, you have to turn the valve back on. And it's kind of this balancing act of letting the original yellow flame burn down and transitioning into the blue flame, because if you turn the valve open too soon, it'll just create more of a yellow flame and you won't be able to cook quite yet. If you wait too long, you risk not being able to actually get the burner going, and so you'll have to start the process over. The other drawback is that it gets a lot sootier than the other ones. The other ones burn pretty clean, but this one, because you're starting off with that inefficient yellow flame in order to bring the fuel up to temperature to work well, it produces some smoke, some soot. So the legs, the burner in here, it tends to just get a little sooty. It's not a big deal if you keep it in a stuff sack, or if, like in my case, I carry a Ziploc bag that I put it into and then I put it into a stuff sack. But it's just one more thing to think about. The fuel here comes in these larger containers, and then this fuel canister right here, from MSR, these come in 3 different sizes. I had the smallest one because I wanted the lightest one, and it works fine for me for a weekend. But on the last trip that I went on, it wasn't quite enough, so I had to go out for one night, and we knew we were coming back to the car because of the way the route was. So I refilled, and then I had enough fuel for the rest of the trip. So I've ordered the next size up, which is an 11 ounce. And that'll give me some versatility, because I can either take the small one for just a weekend trip. I can take the medium-sized one if I'm going out for, say, a 4-day trip. But if I'm going to happen to go out on a week-long trip, I can take the small one and the medium one. And that should give me plenty of fuel for the week. So just a quick recap on the 3 stoves and why I use them. I've got my cat food can stove over here. I use it for really short trips where all I want to do is boil water. I've got my canister stove, which I use for trips that are in warmer weather, that I'm going to do some cooking in my cook pot or just boiling water, but I'm going for several days, which makes it worth taking the canister stove or the canisters with me. And then over here, my liquid gas stove, which I only use in the wintertime because the other 2 stoves either don't burn or don't burn as efficiently in the wintertime. So I take this to get the cold weather advantages of it. Whether you're just starting out and buying your first stove, or whether you're thinking about adding another stove for a different kind of trip you're about to go on, I hope you found this information useful to help you make a decision. Thanks for watching this episode. I hope you'll give this video a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel. From my YouTube channel homepage, you can find links to my Instagram account, which is @OnTheGoWithMark, my Facebook page, which is also On The Go With Mark, and you can find a link to my website. Feel free to comment below or even message me if you'd like to leave comments about this video, or if you'd like to let me know what kind of topics you'd like to see covered in future videos. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again when we're on the go. On the Go with Mark types of trips.